It doesn't take much to get me to buy a game on Switch that I already have. Typically, all something has to do is come out on Switch, and I'll get it because apparently that's how I live my life. It comes out on Switch, that's a good enough reason to do it, because you can play it while you have a poo, if you want. And if there's any game I want to play while I have a poo, it's going to be Devil May Cry 3 Dante's Awakening, thank you very much. It's a really good game. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. I don't know if you've ever heard of Devil May Cry, but it's actually quite a nice series. And Devil May Cry 3, Dante's Awakening, is still hailed today as the best one by a lot of fans. Personally, I think Devil May Cry 5 has outshone it, whichever one of those is right. Either way, something was out and something was shining, and it was Devil May Cry 5 in my opinion. However, Devil May Cry 3 is still frigging excellent. Just to give you an idea of basically as a testament to its quality, this game is 15 years old. I think it was like 2005, around about that region, and it still plays like it's brand new. I hesitate to use the word modern because that is a phrase that ironically dates itself, but I think it's safe to say that 15 years on, and Devil May Cry 3 still plays like a quote-unquote modern video game. And the changes that have been made in the Switch version have only amplified that. You can now switch weapon styles on the fly. In the original version of the game, you had to select a fighting style at the beginning of the game, at the beginning of each mission, and if you could find a statue throughout the level, you could change it there. This version, the Switch version, brings it more in line with the modern Devil May Cry 5s. You may have gotten used to very quick on-the-fly weapon and style switching in Devil May Cry 5, and you can do that here now. And it has had a significant, and dare I say very welcome, impact on the way the game plays. You can now switch between these styles and weapons fluidly. You can roll them into your combos, so your ability to rack up combos and whatnot have been expanded so much more than in the original version of the game. There are a lot of cool attack combinations you can come up with by blending the 4 styles, which later expands to 6 as the game goes on. Although in the early goings, it's Trickster, Swordmaster, Gunslinger, and that's it, thanks. I can't do Royal Guard. I'm not very good at video. I mean, I've never played a video game in my life. I've done my best here. But I ain't doing Royal Guard because you got to time stuff and think about stuff, and I'm just not built for that. Sorry. It's a quality of life improvement that takes a great game and makes it even better so long after it was originally released without compromising anything about what makes the game good. In fact, it only enhances stuff that was already there to make it way more enjoyable. You can play the original version of the game if you want. You can play it without the freestyle mode, but why would you do that? I mean, you can be a purist about it, and if you are a purist about it, then that's perfectly fine and valid, but if you've got the option to switch between all the stuff on the fly, if you've got the option to make the combat feel faster and more fluid, then go for it. It's right there, and it's really good. The base game, as I've said, holds up incredibly well. Devil May Cry 3 was where the series really found its form. Devil May Cry, the original, of course, was very good. Dante in it was kind of cocksure, but also a little bit awkward. I mean, basically he was unintentionally cheesy in a lot of it. And there was, you cringe a little looking at some of the stuff. Devil May Cry 2, what I played of it, was rather drab and grim. Devil May Cry 3 is where the combat became ridiculous. The cheese was intentional. Dante wasn't just cocky, but an arsehole, and quite funny with it. The team started to have a lot more fun experimenting with what Dante can do and emphasizing style in terms of combat, having everything look cool to a far greater degree than previous titles. Boss fights were wildly different, very clever and inventive. The whole game is absurd, it's stupid in the right way. Sometimes I use the word stupid as a point of praise, and I mean that here with Devil May Cry 3. It's very silly, doesn't take itself seriously, despite featuring a lot of characters in the world that take it seriously, which contrasts really nice against Dante, who never really gives off an air that he's that bothered about anything, except of course when he's filling a dark soul with light. The game, by the way, is still fucking hard. Like, I struggled with it a lot back in the day. I was a little bit worse at video games then than I am now, if you can believe it. And this one really, really made me struggle. These days I get on with it a bit better, but I've played almost all of the Devil May Cries recently. Well, at least 1, 4 and 5. And this one, I still struggle with it more than any other, which to some people, of course, is a great thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing for me even, it's just, it is what it is. This game is a fucking challenge, and it's not ashamed to be that, which, again, all holds up. You can play this local co-op as well, the Bloody Palace mode, not so much the main game, which is what I was more interested in. And the whole thing runs incredibly well. I've had a smooth experience with it. That's both docked and handheld. I've played it in both. I've seen no significant, certainly no noticeable, otherwise I'd have noticed it, dip in performance in either mode. Pretty much any drawback with Devil May Cry 3 is a drawback of the original game design. Some people, like I said, might be put off by the difficulty. The other major issue is some of the puzzles. They're a little bit, well, that's where the game is really old-fashioned. There are some really crap environmental puzzles to solve. A lot of backtracking as well. A lot of go to this area, pick up a key, go all the way back to somewhere else to open a door, then go through here and get something and come back here and do something. This has been part of, I think that all harks back to Devil May Cry's roots as a Resident Evil project initially before it became its own thing. So you look in the first Devil May Cry and that whole castle setting, certainly in the early portion, feels like you're wandering around a Resident Evil environment. And that carried on for a while until they decided better, because they were right to decide better, and they knocked it on the fucking head. But as I sit here right now thinking about it, trying to rack my brains for any other caveats, I ain't got nothing. The game is still remarkably excellent. I mean, the fact that I can go back to it after all this time and it still feels fresh is, I mean, it's beyond impressive. I don't know if there's much more I can say. I mean, if you've already played it, you know how great it is, and its quality just speaks for itself. If not for the admittedly nice and HD PS2 era visuals, then you wouldn't know. I don't think that you'd know that it was as old as it is, that it was indeed a PlayStation 2 game. If you consider yourself a fan of action games and you've not tried this, I mean, this is your perfect opportunity. Coming out fresh with these nice little quality of life tweaks. It's the best version of Devil May Cry 3 that it could be, and I don't think there are many genre fans that wouldn't tell you it's one of the finest examples of an action game, certainly of its type, that there is. It's a game that turns cool into a mechanic and does so with aplomb, which I've said just because I like saying the word aplomb. And aside from the fact that playing it handheld using native Switch controls can make your fingers broken and gnarled and withered, it sits at home perfectly on Nintendo's console, which is full of ports and re-releases, which I certainly don't think is a bad thing myself, especially because it's backed up by a lot of original stuff as well. So I say bring it on, because I really like all these ports, and I will happily take the excuses to play these games again in a modern setting, on a modern system, I should say, and certainly with the option to go handheld with it. And that's your Devil May Cry 3, Dante's Awakening. It's such a bloody good game, though.